smile for a moment. I just boiled over. Then I put the phone to my ear again and asked my sister-in-law, Amy, if she really invited that rascal to meet us at the hospice. Yes, Jim. I tried to talk her out of it, but she persisted. I don't know why she wants him there tonight, but it's time to deal with it. Shit, she wants Susie there too? No, she said the 3-year-old is too young to hear what she wants to communicate today. Alright, Anaha, I'll take Susie to her parents on my way to the hospice. I'll see you there in about 30 minutes. As I pulled into the hospice parking lot, Amy got out of her car and walked over to me, and I gave her a brief hug. God, this is going to be hard. I know. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Well, let's get this over with. We entered the hospice and walked to the nurse's station. One of the nurses greeted us with a smile. Hello, Mr. Johnson, and turned to Amy. Hello, Dr. Allen. Your sister is having a good day today. She's hardly used the morphine pump this afternoon. She's in her room with a friend waiting for you. Thank you, Cindy. I'm glad the cancer gave her a little respite today. We walked down the hall to Elaine's room. When I looked at Amy, I cringed. It's gonna be okay, she said, stroking my cheek. I nodded, and we walked into the room. The room was quiet and dark, the wide window overlooking the beautiful garden. A pale and exhausted Elaine lay in bed. Trevor, looking unassuming as usual, sat at the headboard. He stood up and held out his hand to me. I ignored him, walked over to the bed and spoke. Hi, Elaine. She grabbed my hand and tried to pull me to her for a kiss, but I resisted. I shook her hand and then yanked mine away. Amy then sat down on the opposite side of the bed from Trevor. Thank you for coming here, Elaine said. I know it's awkward for us to be here, but I hope we all want the same thing, to do what's right for our daughter. Susie is definitely my top priority at the moment, I said, glancing in Trevor's direction, and added, but what's that man doing here? Elaine shook her head gently. I'll get to that in a minute. I asked to see you today for 2 reasons. First, you and Amy are my heroes. You've made the best moments of my life possible, and I have you to thank for that. Second, I have 2 final requests of you. She turned to Amy and said, I can't imagine a better big sister than you. I've looked up to you my whole life. You've always supported me, even when I didn't deserve it. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even have Susie. When we were growing up, we both looked forward to having kids. I was devastated when I found out you had a uterine malformation that would make you never be able to have children of your own. Yes, it was one of the most bitter moments of my life. It's the main reason I got into midwifery and reproductive medicine. I hoped that by helping other women get pregnant, I could find a way to do it for myself. I'm so glad you did, Elaine said. When Jim and I couldn't get pregnant, I was devastated. Thank you for supporting me through the infertility testing and then the whole in vitro fertilization process. And I'm glad I was able to help you. And you replied, Taupe, it's more than that. You're my hero. You've also been a wonderful aunt to Susie. I feel so much better dying, knowing that you will be there to love and hold her when I'm gone. All I want to ask of you now is to continue to love Susie and to help Jim raise her to be a good woman like you. Amy sobbed and took Elaine's hand. Of course it is. I'll never stop loving Susie and helping Jim. Elaine turned to me and said, that was the easy part. What I want to ask of you is much more complicated. I know that my relationship with Trevor has hurt you terribly. I threw her a look full of annoyance and replied, yeah, you could say that. You broke my life, and for what? I still don't understand why you cheated on me with him in the first place. Elaine stared at her lap, pushed away. I went a little nuts when we were struggling to get pregnant. Even though Amy said your sperm count was perfectly fine, I didn't quite believe her. I looked at Amy, who only shrugged her shoulders. I was desperate and willing to try anything. Elaine continued. Trevor was working in the office next door, and one day during lunch, he saw me crying. She looked at Trevor and smiled. Trevor was so sweet. He held my hand while I cried, and eventually I told him about our fertility issues. Over the next few months, we became pretty close friends. I snorted and rolled my eyes. I know it was irrational, but I thought that maybe there was a tiny chance that if you couldn't put me down, then let someone else do it. Trevor volunteered to help. I looked at Trevor, and then at Elaine with an expression of utter disgust. Yeah, he should have volunteered. So instead of relying on your sister's medical knowledge, or asking your husband for help, you went to bed with the creep? You make it sound so dirty. Elaine grimaced. At first, sex was just a way to increase my chances of getting pregnant. But somewhere along the way, Trevor and I fell in love. It was amazing. I was loved by 2 wonderful men at the most difficult time of my life. I wanted to find a way to keep you both. What made you think I would ever agree to that? He asked. I was afraid you would divorce me when you found out, but you didn't. You became my hero for putting up with the whole damn IVF circus with me. And when I finally got pregnant, you were just as excited as I was. I nodded. I did think about divorce, but I wanted the baby more than I wanted to leave you. And that's what convinced me that you still loved me enough to ask you one last big favor, she said. She took a deep breath, then exhaled and said, I know how much you love Susie. I'm asking you to let Trevor be a part of her life too. I want you to give him joint custody of Susie after I'm gone, so that both of my wonderful men can be in her life and raise her to be a wonderful girl. I looked at the creep. His face had lost its usual tinge of smugness. He bit his lip and looked concerned. I hadn't expected such a request from Elaine. I raised my eyebrows and looked at Amy, who seemed as surprised as I was. Finally, I turned to Elaine again and replied, No way. Thank you, said Elaine. Wait, what did you say? I said no. Nope, no way, not a goddamn chance. After you're dead, there's no way I'm letting that bastard see my daughter. Elaine looked at me in amazement and burst into tears. After a minute, she pulled herself together and sighed. Okay, I was hoping you'd be above this, but you've left me no choice. You're going to have to give Trevor joint custody. Why is that? Because you, Jim, are not Susie's father. I looked at her. And what makes you think that? Elaine looked at me with sad eyes and said, I didn't want to tell you this, but I wanted to have a child with each of my wonderful men. I convinced Amy to use Trevor's sperm for IVF. I was going to use your sperm for a second IVF in a few years. However, cancer got in the way, and now that's not going to happen. I turned to Amy and raised my eyebrows. She nodded. Yes, that's what she asked me to do. I'm sure the DNA test will confirm my parental rights to Susie. Trevor smirked. Actually, Trevor, a DNA test won't do anything for you, Amy replied. Trevor looked stunned. Why? It's very simple, said Amy. Elaine tried to convince me to use your IVF material. However, all she convinced me of was what assholes you both are. Amy turned to her sister again and said, I've had your back your whole life. I covered for you when you wrecked Dad's car, gave you antibiotics, and gave you a loan when you and Jim couldn't afford IVF. Elaine turned her head. You're right, without you, IVF would never have happened. It wouldn't have happened, Amy snarled. I was happy to help, because that's what sisters do for each other. But you crossed the line when you asked me to betray Jim like that. It was beyond selfishness. It was pure evil. So you didn't use Trevor's sample? Hell no, snorted Amy. It went in the trash with the rest of our clinic's medical waste. The only materials involved in your IVF was Jim's. Elaine gasped, then screamed, You bitch, why did you do this to me? And why did you do that to Jim? Amy grinned. Elaine struggled to find the words. Well, at least I have a baby. Again, I'm like you. I'm not a genetic dead end. As soon as the words left her mouth, Elaine looked at Amy in horror. My God, please forgive me. I said a terrible thing. That's right, dearie, Amy grinned. It's a cruel thing to say to any childless woman, but it didn't hurt me at all because it's not true. That's what do you mean? Susie's mother? But that can't be true. I carried her. I gave birth to her. Yes, you had a baby, honey, but the eggs that combined with Jim's sperm were mine. I'm Susie's birth mother, and in due time, after you're dead and buried, Jim and I will be married, and I will take great pleasure in officially adopting my own daughter. I looked at Elaine. If you thought I would ever willingly share you or my daughter with that scumbag, you were deluded. But why didn't you get divorced? Why did you go through IVF with me? I shook my head. When Amy told me you asked her to switch my materials with the scumbag's materials, I almost kicked you out of the house. I turned to the creep. I was also close to coming over and beating the hell out of you, and I would have helped, Agony said. But we really didn't want to go to jail. I turned to my dying wife. Amy and I had many wild fantasies of revenge before we settled on a more appropriate response to your betrayal. We decided that neither you nor the bastard was worthy of being parents, but we realized that you could be a great surrogate mother for us. Amy said if it worked, we were going to use you to carry another one of our children. However, as you said yourself, cancer, and so on and so forth. Elaine seemed to be out of her depth. What about my eggs? Did you throw them away too? Lackey poets? I didn't, Amy said reproachfully, although I came damn close to doing so. They are currently safe and sound in our clinic's freezer and labeled as an anonymous donation. Sooner or later, one of my patients will need an egg donor to get pregnant. If someone with your physical characteristics is needed, we can provide them with your eggs. That way, no one will ever know about it, and Trevor will have nothing to do with the baby. I turned to Elaine. If anything, Amy and I were ready to spare you all this worry and let you die in peace. However, you forced us to do it, and now it's all in your conscience. I still love you, honey, despite all the crap you've done. So Jim and I are going to give you one last chance to redeem yourself. You're going to die in the next few weeks, and it's going to give you one last chance to redeem yourself. You're going to die in the next few weeks, and it's going to be very hard on Susie. We hope that you love her enough to make your last days with her special and your passing easier for her. I took Amy's hand and then turned to Elaine again. When Susie gets older, she will probably want to know more about the story of her birth. We can tell her the sad story of the selfish and lying whore who betrayed me. Or we can tell the story of the brave sister who helped Amy and I have the baby we always wanted. Personally, I know which story I'd rather tell. Amy said, "Honey, you talked about Jim and I being your heroes. What's your choice? Do you want to be a hero yourself this time? At least for Susie,